You are listening to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast.
Welcome to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast. I'm your host, Tim Hampton. My unusually well-informed guest today is Christie Turley. Christie is a serial entrepreneur and growth strategist who helps companies develop their communication and branding. She is also a podcaster, keynote speaker, and author. Today, Christie and I are discussing her book titled The Intuition-Led Business. Christie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. It's good to be here.
It's my pleasure. Early in the book, you quote Albert Einstein, which is always a great place to start. And he called the intuitive mind a sacred gift and the rational mind a faithful servant. Why have we come to focus on the servant instead of the gift?
We are so connected to the material world. We've been conditioned to do this for probably millennia, if not centuries, to be focused on finding answers in the external world. And a lot of us growing up, it was really instilled in us to value our minds, to value being smart, for having the right questions and the right answers and completing your homework and having achievements and being in sports and et cetera, et cetera. And we are driven to consume. I am a capitalist. I believe in business and all of that. It's true though. Like we're very externally focused on status, on achievements, on possessions. And I feel like because society has gone this way, we have forgotten to just be. We have forgotten to value stillness. And we have misplaced our value in the external and forgotten our true value, which is that we are divine internally. We have a soul. You know, our value doesn't come in what we own and our titles. It comes from within. It's divinely inherent.
So you have a unique perspective on work-life balance. Instead of drawing a sharp line between the two, you say that we can find life in our work. What role does intuition play in that?
So when you are really aligned to who you are, and I feel like that is the biggest lesson we're all here to learn, to know thyself, to know ourselves, to truly know what makes us valuable human beings and souls inside. And when we can really express who we are through our work and our play, the two really run together. When we remember that it's not, so you might be familiar with be, do, have, and have, do, be. A lot of us operate from the have. Well, I have something, you know, and I, therefore I am. You know, we're defined by how much is in our bank accounts, and that makes us successful, correct? Well, we have it backwards. If we can just remember that who we are, first and foremost, that's the be, that's the most important. If we have a desire to be successful, then what do successful people do? And then therefore, when they do that, they have these certain things. And so really there's actually a quote that I give in the book by L.P. Jacks. And I love this quote so much, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it right in front of me, but it's basically saying that a master of living is one that does not make these boundaries between life and work. And they leave it up to others to decide if they're really working or if they're really playing. And I have spent most of my career playing and loving what I do, but there was a certain point in time where I did not like waking up in the morning. It had lost its fun. I had lost my spark coming to work. And that is a major clue. If you don't love what you do, and look, the stats don't lie. It's like 70% of people don't like their jobs. And if that is indicative of entrepreneurs and how much they love their business, then we might be in trouble. And when I started to lose that spark, that was really like this period in time where if we think about our lives going in seasons, just like we go throughout the year, spring, summer, fall, winter, this was the beginning of a fall, so to speak, pun intended.
Yes.
Where I started to really look at, what do I need to refine? What do I need to remove? What am I no longer enjoying? Am I focused on the wrong things? Am I working on things that are not in my zone of genius, that are not aligned to myself, to my higher purpose? And what I found was a lot of what I was doing wasn't aligned anymore. I had evolved. I had outgrown it, so to speak. And so it really took a lot of introspection during that fall, and then the subsequent winter and death of identity and death of, this is what I thought I was according to what I was doing. And that led to a whole new perspective, and really was foundational to my book, The Intuition-Led Business.
So you're talking to a Canadian, so I'll do anything to avoid winter, but you have gone through this cycle many times in your career. You've been like I said, several entrepreneurial ventures. Can you sort of walk through a little bit all the different types of businesses you've gone through?
Yeah, there's many. I've owned more than, let's see, what am I on? 9 now. And, what's been consistent throughout my career is my marketing and branding firm. I've always had that since 2004. That's my bread and butter. And I think really what it was this external search for wanting to make a difference in the world. And I thought that what I was doing in marketing and branding maybe wasn't as valuable. Like, I was helping other people get richer. Like, I wasn't feeling that fulfilled. So I was always on the lookout for something that really spoke to me, that would be fun, that would be more leverage, would be, something where maybe I could step away a little longer than usual and spend time with the family if I wanted, and not feel so chained to my business. So being the super achiever that I am, I ended up starting several other businesses with my husband, also sometimes with other business partners. I've had 3 different business partners and learned a lot about what to do and what not to do when partnering with other people. And some of those businesses are e-commerce businesses, like physical products. Actually, some of them were actually physical products that weren't necessarily e-commerce, that were also brick and mortar, but always an online component. Digital products, publishing company, a clothing company, which was also falls under e-commerce, but we had the unique problem to solve of actually creating the clothes. It wasn't like we were just like buying something and flipping it. We were actually designing our own clothes, which was really cool. And a software company. And of course, the original foundational business, my bread and butter, marketing and branding. So I've had a lot of fun doing all these different businesses, and some of them were successful. Some of them were not, and I say, if you're not failing, you're not learning, and you're not succeeding either, because certainly they're 2 sides of the same coin. So I actually had this insight a couple weeks ago. I'll just share with you briefly. I had a dream where I was in this parking lot searching for my car. And I could not find it anywhere. And I ended up finding this big pile of, it looked like trash. It just looked like a demolished building almost. Climbed on top of it, was able to find my car. And I thought this was so symbolic, because the car is symbolic of vehicles, a way to get somewhere, a way, if you will, to express your soul's identity in this world, which you can call a business, right? And this trash heap that I came across to find where my car is in this parking lot, I came to realize that this was a lot of, learning experiences, failures. And, I talk about it in my podcast. Actually, I have an episode called The Vantage Point of Failure, because I feel like it's so important to innovation, to success, and to really being an entrepreneur. And all those experiences and all these different businesses have given me such a wide variety of experience, not to mention all the different clients that I've worked with one-on-one, has given me like such an innovative quality. It's like I'm so open to so many possibilities because I've seen it done in so many different ways in so many different industries.
So there's a lot to that answer. Thank you for that. And one of the threads I'd like to pull on is the idea that you are trying several different things. You're iterating, if you will. You're trying to see which business suits you best, and obviously intuition plays a role in that because you're tapping into what your interests are. But also you're directly addressing that cycle you described of spring, summer, fall, and winter. And you seem to be skipping winter a little bit, or are you not? Like, how do you parse that? How do you realize you're about to fall because you're losing interest or discovering it simply isn't you? And how are you able to swing to the next venture?
Yeah, that's great. What's interesting about this external search for other businesses, it really came before this. I'm not that old, but I think I had a midlife awakening a little sooner than some people.
Yeah.
And I feel like this serial entrepreneurship, while it may continue, it's not going to continue in the same way. I wasn't employing my intuition as much. I kept searching for fulfillment in all these different ways. And yeah, that's an interesting point. I do feel like you can't skip winter. But I feel like in some ways I may have failed to see some of the learning experiences until later, until this midlife awakening. And, for entrepreneurs or for thinking types, people who think a lot or are very innovative, it can be difficult to get into the grief that can come in winter. We might want to just skip on past it. Some of us, if we are in a business where our sales are declining, we can be in the fall, perhaps even the winter, and fail to recognize that there are some things that we need to let go of and let die.
Right.
And instead, sometimes what we do is we throw more money at it or we throw more people at it, hoping that the problem is going to go away. And that's really a failure to recognize what your intuition is probably trying to get through to you. And if not, your physical circumstances are trying to get to you so that you can take it to your inner world and contemplate and ponder, is there something I need to let go of here? Is there something I need to surrender to? Is there something that I must let go and just let it unfold? They say, let go and let God. What does that actually mean? It means turn it over. Say, you know what? If this isn't working anymore, if I'm not happy anymore, show me a different way, intuition. Show me what I'm missing. Show me, some new possibility that I may not have considered before so that you can plant new seeds for spring so they can start to grow. And if you fail to recognize some of those signs, you can also fail to plant the proper seeds for the next cycle. So it's really important.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier the challenge that comes with coming up with your own identity, and you have a model in your book that talks about connecting identity to influence and also intuition to impact. Mm-hmm. That model was really intriguing. Can you expand on how that works and how it can help us shape our intuition?
Yeah. So the 4 I's that you're talking about are identity, influence, intuition, and impact. And a lot of businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially, even personality-led brands, I would throw that in there. Because you can have a business and you can also have a personality-led brand. What we tend to think is that we need to spend a lot of time on identity. This is coming from a branding person, right? We've got to have the right brand, the right identity, the right image that we're projecting into the world to have influence, to be able to attract and magnetize the right audience to us so that we can sell our products and our services. Well, the problem with this is that we get stuck here. And a lot of us, what we're really after is a greater sense of purpose and fulfillment and to have impact, which means that your world, your little business, I'm saying that facetiously, you could have a big business, but really you could have an effect or an impact that's very small because you're playing small. And when you're focused on your purpose and you're aligned to that and you want to have this big impact and change the world, the only way to do that is to shift your paradigm just a bit, just a few degrees. And that's involving your intuition. And when you can draw upon your intuition, this is something we're all born with, but very few of us have learned how to really use and maximize. This is how the great inventors have come up with so many wonderful, amazing, world-changing inventions. It's because they knew how to draw upon this intuitive mind rather than the rational mind. And that's what I discuss in my book, is how to do that and how to do that quickly. So when you can involve that intuition, that's when you switch from influence to impact. Influence is very me-centered. It's very self-centered. Right. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're selfish. It just means your world ends where you end. If you want to have a bigger impact than that, it's necessary to make this shift and start using your intuition so that you can have that greater impact.
So the way you describe it, it reminds me of human-centeredness. It's this idea that you really need to tap into what your customers need, and sometimes they can't even tell you. So you almost have to tap into their life experience and then use your intuition to come up with a solution. And it seems to me that what the message I get is you actually need to do that with your own self. That if you don't observe how you're feeling or how you're reacting to things, if you don't take a moment to reflect on that, you're just going to keep blindly doing outputs without generating the outcomes. Because I say that a lot when you're trying to meet your customers' needs too. Am I close to describing?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in all the entrepreneurs, like thousands of entrepreneurs that I've worked with over the past 18 years, it's a lot of people. When they're having problems in their business with their marketing or their sales, one of the biggest ahas that I had is a lot of times they're disconnected from themselves. Mm. And when you're disconnected from yourself, you're disconnected from your team, you're disconnected from your customers, not to mention your family and your loved ones. When you can become more connected to yourself, who you really are, with like stripped down naked, so to speak, where you're not, clinging to your titles, your achievements, how much money you've made, how successful you've been, how many languages you know, how many people you know, the famous people, whatever. When you can disconnect from that and really realize who you are and what your biggest gifts are to give in this world and to express and to be, when you become that connected, you then naturally become more connected to others. You naturally love others more. You are more interested in them. Same thing with, so your team, your customers all fall into that. And you start naturally gravitating towards the type of work that you love the most because you know yourself better.
That's excellent. And one of the symptoms, I imagine, of somebody not really being in touch with what they want to do, where they're focused on, again, that idea of outputs rather than outcomes. So they're generating stuff, but they're not necessarily meeting a need. Entrepreneurs can get into this trap of being super busy and stressed out and trying to get to the bottom of the to-do pile. And I love this. You argue that instead of eating the frog, we should get to work doing the things that inspire us. How does that create greater productivity?
Yeah, so I know that a lot of us have heard that term, eat that frog, which basically means you focus on the thing that is the biggest, ugliest thing that you have to do that day. Have to do, should do.
Yeah.
How depressing, how obligatory, how shaming, like you should do this. It's your parents talking, probably, or your grandparents. So get rid of the shoulds, of course. Eating that frog and having to face that mountain first thing in the day without a warm up, without being inspired by, being excited. Instead, I would say work on something that lights you up. Recharge your batteries. Energy has to come from somewhere. It doesn't come from nothing, If you spend so much energy trying to eat that frog at the beginning of the day, you're going to have nothing left in your tank for the rest of the day. Instead, if you fill up that tank first thing, work on something that you love, create something, use that creative life force that's in every one of us. You don't have to be an artist to have creative life force. You just have to be human. And do that, and then you will have so much more energy to eat that frog later in the day. Trust me.
That's good. The other thing you remind us, I think you said that it came from the military, the idea that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. How do we apply this to our business and our life?
Yeah. So, the military has this saying, and I've always loved it. And of course, what they're doing is they're applying this slow is smooth and smooth is fast to target practice, to face warlike situations, right? And the idea is when you can slow down your breathing, when you can really just zone into what it is that you're going to be doing here in the next couple of seconds, and you can pull that trigger back smooth and then quickly hit your target. And in business, we can use this as well. I mean, we all have goals, we all have a target. And when we can take that time, in the airlines, they say, put on your oxygen mask first before reaching to help someone else. Yeah. It's the same idea. You cannot serve others from an empty cup. You've got to fill up your cup first. And what I mean by that is this idea of self-care. I talk about the rule of take 8. There's several meanings to it, but if you can at least just take 8 minutes, and I talk about the other parts of the take 8, but if at the very least take 8 minutes at the beginning of your day, create a morning routine, a morning ritual where you can really connect with yourself and what it is that's going to light you up. Maybe think about what that first project is that you're going to work on. You're going to have such a smoother day. I always like to say it's like Einstein time. I made this up. It's like if you invest 8 minutes, it pays dividends throughout the day. Like I feel like I get at least 2 hours back in productivity if you just add up all the time. That day works so much smoother. And I love to work fast. So if anything, let that be your incentive. If you want to work faster, you've got to invest that time in yourself at the beginning of the day.
So let's explore that a little more. So the 8 minutes that you spend, is that about really focusing on your intention for the day? What are you doing are you psyching yourself up?
Yes. Okay. Great question. So I would say, first of all, this is going to be different for everyone. I am not a fan of one size fits all approaches. Okay. Yeah. So I give a few ideas in the book. One of them is, yes, you can definitely psych yourself up with affirmations. You can also journal. And I recommend journaling in handwriting rather than typing on a computer. There's just something about that mind-hand connection that just allows you to explore your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, and then you can see it, written out all on paper and really analyze it and see, that's interesting. You can see progress over time as well. Also, prayer is super important to open up, if that aligns to you, of course. If not, you can talk to yourself. You don't, I mean, you can, I say talk to God because that's your divine connection to your soul. But you can talk to yourself too.
Sure.
And ask yourself questions. What's going to light me up today? And also meditating, just spending time. Like, it's one thing to ask, to intend, to express gratitude. It's another thing to sit and listen. Too many of us, say our prayers in the morning and we're like, okay, peace out. Like, we don't even listen if there is an idea that comes through or an insight. I use the term prayer too in a couple of different ways. I feel like throughout the day, I always have a prayer in my heart. I'm not like sitting there like praying to God every single time, but a lot of times I'm sitting there, I'm like, ask a question, but I'm like directing it up. I'm not at myself. So that's what I mean, having a prayer in your heart. And I think that's so important to help us be creative, to have that creative life force come through, and to have those very surprising, innovative ideas that sometimes change everything. One idea could be worth more than $1 million and millions of lives changed. So it's well worth it to take that 8 every day.
So how do I stop the things that interfere with my intuition? What are the blockages that people can have?
Yeah, there's a few that I talk about this. And this really is like, it's almost like a light switch. It's like turning on and off this radio that I call the innovation station. If you want to tune into the innovation station, there's a certain frequency. Think about it just like the radio. You have to have a precise number that you tune into to get a clear frequency on that particular radio station, correct? So if I want the innovation station, I need to remove any interference, anything that could interfere, like maybe loss of batteries. I talked about self-care just earlier, but there's certain things that will turn off our intuition, will turn off that power of the innovation station. And I see this a lot. You're going to recognize these signs and symptoms, maybe in yourself, possibly in a lot of society. We desire to be polite and follow social norms. So if we have that belief that we have to follow social norms and be polite, we may not be open to something that might be a little rebellious, that might be a little innovative, that might be a little bit edgy. We would already be turned off to that before we even began. So that's one type of belief, and it's really like a program that's installed, like a computer program that's installed in our mind as we're growing up, like conditioning. Especially women, you got to be a nice little girl, be a nice young lady. We're very polite,
Yeah.
And so that's one. Another one is that we are conditioned to use our head and logic. Right. Speaking of conditioning, if that's what your family really valued, that's you're going to believe evidence and facts over fleeting intuitive thoughts, right? Another one is that we might not believe that we have the right to feel the way that we do. So if there's this particular business situation or even life situation that makes you feel uncomfortable, not for reasons that it's outside of your comfort zone, but for reasons like something's not quite right. This person might be lying to me, but they're really an upstanding citizen. Maybe, if we feel that we don't have the right to believe the way that we do or feel the way that we do, how are we going to be able to listen to anything that is contrary to that coming through our intuition? So, I could give you more if you want to keep going down this train of thought.
That's terrific. I mean, that
yeah,
you're talking about gut feel, right?
Yeah.
And so many people have run into trouble and said, if only I'd listened to my gut, which is another way of saying intuition, right? Yeah. And you have described in your book a situation where a partnership went awry. Was that something that kind of developed on its own, or was that something you could have seen in advance with intuition?
It's such a good question because there were a lot of variables in that particular situation. Like, there were things about it that just felt like it was right. It just felt like it was right. And it was probably was. Like, I really truly feel like that particular experience was one that overall was pretty uplifting and was a good learning experience. Had I continued down the path and not listened to my intuition when I was starting to feel like maybe something's not quite right here, maybe what this person is telling me isn't quite true, it's not lining up with the data and facts, I might have continued and it would have been a disaster. But instead, I was given the opportunity to say, you know, let's press pause on this particular project and part as friends. And ultimately, that was like a little blip. It was like some people describe a partnership breakup as like, oh, so horrible. And like that one wasn't. It was just like kind of like meeting someone and being like, okay, let's talk to each other for a while and support each other. And then, you know what? No, the time has passed. Like, go on our separate ways. It felt really good. So I think there are situations where if we were to stop and inquire of our intuition, we could avoid certain circumstances. And like you said, oh, I should have listened, you know. But we can only see those things sometimes in hindsight. And that's part of our learning and growing, is really learning how to tap into that intuition. And that's why I wish to serve people with this information so they can avoid situations like that and really recognize how intuition works and why it works differently in so many different people.
Well, and I think that's a valuable lesson too, is that intuition is not a one-time event. You need to keep tapping into it. You can't just conclude, okay, they always say, I could tell this guy was going to, or this girl was going to be terrific the moment I met them. Well, keep tapping into that intuition. Things can change. People can grow differently. Their priorities can change, and you can miss those signals. So well done for catching that when you could.
Yes.
What should we do when our intuition drives us out of our comfort zone? How do we, how they always say sometimes you have a heart attack and you feel it over here because you don't necessarily recognize the feeling from your heart. Have you heard that before, that the symptoms are weird?
Yeah.
How do you distinguish between an intuition, a whisper you hear inside saying you should really do this, and this other whisper that's saying, no, it's too hard, it's not possible? How do you distinguish those two?
Yeah, it takes practice. It really does. And that's why identity is so important as a foundational concept, because let's say you do get an intuitive nudge, and we all deal with resistance. If you have not read Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art, I highly recommend it, because he talks about resistance and this idea of getting out of your comfort zone. And as entrepreneurs, if we're not faced with resistance, I'd say at least once a week, we're probably doing something wrong. It's about pushing the envelope and being able to make that impact. And how can we do that if we're playing small? So to answer your question, like if it's something that invites you to do something good, to do something uplifting, if it's inspiring, if it's somehow exciting on some level, you're passionate about it, there's some good feeling about it, chances are it probably is coming from your intuition. And the other part that's coming at you, which is, oh, it's going to take too long, or it's too hard, or whatever, that's probably coming from your ego, because your ego wants you to remain small and to play small. And we're not here to play small. We're here to make a big difference as entrepreneurs. I feel like entrepreneurs are the ones that make the world go round with our solutions and our products. So, I would say, find ways to overcome that resistance, clear it out of the way, see if there's some kind of limiting belief or conditioning that's creeping up from your past, from your childhood even, and see if you can recognize, when was the first time I felt that way? And to the question of, oh, it's hard or it'll take too much time, a question I like to play out when I have that come up is, if this looked easy, if this looked effortless, what would it look like?
Right.
Because sometimes our egos also like to make things complex, and they don't have to be.
That's a Tim Ferriss suggestion, right? He says, what would this look like if it were easy?
I've heard it repeated so many times. If
Yeah.
that's who
I think it
originally
started there,
said
but it's a
it, then I'm
great piece
happy
of
to attribute
advice.
it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also like the point you're making, which is if the reason you're thinking of not doing it is because it looks hard, that's probably, like the what is it, Pluto, the angel Pluto and devil Pluto? It's probably devil Pluto that's trying to
Probably.
undermine you there.
Yes, because when we are stepping up or up leveling or taking on a bigger role in our life and business, that little devil always makes its appearance, because it's partly your ego. You can also think of it as, just like there's light in the world, there's dark in the world. And it can take many forms, from thoughts in your head that sound like maybe a parent, to someone physical remarking, nah, we can't do that right now. So yeah, you've got to weigh it. And I love that, because more often than not, if those types of questions, that if it looked this way, or if it were easy, if it didn't take very much time, if it didn't cost very much money, what would it look like?
So I'd like to revisit that be, do, have model that you brought up earlier, because I think it is a really powerful way to reframe our desires into identity and then action. How do you recommend entrepreneurs use it?
So how do I recommend entrepreneurs go to the be, do, have model?
Yeah. How do you engage with that? Like, for example, you have this idea that you want to create a new business. I really like the idea that for you to succeed in that, you need to be the person with the skills and the drive and everything else. So you sort of have to work on yourself before you work on your business. That's how I'm imagining that model. Do you want to see is that a good interpretation?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll take this question from this angle. So when you start a business, a lot of us who are listening to this probably have been in business for a while. So it's not like you can stop everything in your business to have a vision quest and find out who you really are and your purpose. And that's done daily in your take 8. It's done throughout your day. It's done through tapping into your intuition and having that, quote, prayer in your heart, or however you want to say it. It's constantly tapping into that intuitive source. So we do have a lot of us, like, I'll give this example, this story that I have about being a member of this mastermind. And I'm going to answer it this way. So this mastermind was like this elite club. It had all these cool kids in it. Like, if you're in a certain industry, you probably know a lot of these people by name, their household names. And I thought, wow, this is going to be really cool to not necessarily be the smartest person in the room, right? To have other people who are smart in the room. Really great way to grow my business, rub shoulders with these cool kids. And that's going to help me, achieve my goals, right? And what's really interesting is, through the course of these 3 years, I loved the people that I was meeting. There were a lot of things about the mastermind I liked, a lot of things I didn't like. And I tended to just kind of brush the things I didn't like under the rug, not realizing that it's because they weren't aligned. Like, I wasn't completely aligned to some of the things that were happening in this group. And I didn't listen to that intuition. And it's because I was associating my value with this status or these relationships that I was building. Like, I have to have a certain income to even be in this group. And then to be in this group, then that means I'm going to be this celebrity or something. I mean, I'm not that was my number one intent, but that was kind of like how it was sold.
It was part of the process.
Yeah, it was like part of the outcome. And I failed to recognize, wait a second, the way I've been, the way I've the B part that I've been in my business for the last, at this time, 15 years, actually was what earned my ticket into the group, not the amount of money in my bank account or anything else. And so when the time came to leave that group, and I was asked to leave the group, and I didn't know why. I still don't know why. It broke my heart. It shattered my confidence because my foundation was built on something that did not matter. That wasn't really me. And so to really play into who are you, you've got to do some exploration of what your core values are, what your motivations are, what you will stand for, what you stand against, what virtues you're adopting, what's your purpose? Like, what are you here to do? Like, what are you here to express? And I feel like when you can start from that, then the do is in alignment. You can't do something anymore that doesn't feel in alignment to that when you're sure and certain of who you are and what that be is.
Right.
And then from that do, a natural result of that is to have certain things. So if I am a millionaire, how would I act? Okay, do those things. Great.
Right.
Now you have $1 million. Like, we've got it backwards. We do.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's interesting that you were having misgivings, and yet we're also affected by being asked to leave. It's like the Groucho Marx line that I wouldn't want to be a member of any club that would have me, but you were being rejected from a club you didn't even want to be in.
Right.
That's gotta hurt.
So yeah, it was so interesting because the last few meetings I went to, I was kind of miserable. And one of my business coaches was saying to me, "Are you sure that's the group for you?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." Because I was like focused on the glamour and the glitz instead of like, was it really a match? Like a vibrational match? Like, was I really aligned to it? I failed to ask those questions. And so sometimes when we don't listen to the universe acts for us.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the future, because obviously a lot of entrepreneurs are looking into the future and trying to predict what can be useful and where they can find a role. Many are predicting a huge rebirth in the economy after COVID. Some might even say this is a new spring for the whole world, right? The fact that we're coming out of this pandemic. How can we seize the opportunity that represents?
I do believe that there is a rebirth. After every death, there is a birth. Winter is always followed by spring. So I do agree with that. As far as the time frame, when people say post-COVID, what do they mean? 2021, 2022? I don't know about that.
Right.
I think that, as I was discussing at the beginning of this episode, we've gotten so far into the rational mind and not into the intuitive mind. When we can start learning to not just take what someone else says as fact, like whether it's an expert, whether it's a politician or someone on the media, when we can start just using that information as input and then putting it through our own God-given intuition and deciding, is that true? When we can do that and stop giving our power away and start claiming our own power and using critical thinking skills, I think that's truly when the spring happens, because we will stop looking to entities outside of ourselves to solve problems. Instead, we will start looking inwards. We will start looking at ourselves. Mahatma Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." When we can truly live that, that's when I feel the rebirth will happen, and not until then. And I feel like we are headed for a lot of change in the next 5 to 10 years. The kind of change that'll probably blow our minds if we knew about it right now. Like, who could have predicted some of even the inventions we've had in the last 10 or 15 years? I feel like the type of inventions and innovations that are going to come out in the next 5 to 10 years and the amount of change is going to dwarf that. I think the way that we stay above water, the way that we can do that is through tapping into our intuition to lead our business with intuition. That's the only way we're going to be able to face these problems that we've never seen before, to come up with solutions that we've never come up with before. It's through our intuition.
Yeah, I do agree with you on the notion that there's no going back to normal, right? The way I kind of have described COVID,
Mhm.
it's almost like when there's a tsunami, the water goes out and then it comes in, but it doesn't just stop at the shoreline again. It rewrites the shoreline. It goes back and forth for a while. And so this idea that you have to constantly be alert to what you want and what your customers might want intuitively, I think that makes a lot of sense. You need to really be alert with all these changes. Are they affecting your business decisions? Do you have any intuitions about what's going on in the world?
I feel like people are really waking up to what truth really is, and they're waking up to a lot of the where they've put their faith, into structures and systems and governmental institutions and educational institutions. And they're really starting to recognize that they are powerful. The people are powerful. Entrepreneurs are powerful. And I feel like that's going to just bring a lot of innovation in the world. As far as, my business in particular, like I've been in business long enough to remember the last recession we were in back in 2008. And I feel like our business actually grew because the smart businesses were looking for ways to innovate. They were looking for ways to market more creatively. And I felt like, we really answered that. In the future, I do have some predictions for businesses. So I feel like we are headed towards such uncharted waters. And because everyone is waking up, they're definitely more in tune with their intuition. They definitely can tell when a company is just out for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I see the shift where people are going to be holding companies, political institutions more accountable. And hypocrisy is not going to be allowed anymore. You can't say one thing and do another. They're going to be holding people accountable. And that means the way that we market is going to change. The way that we brand ourselves is going to change. It used to be that people didn't really care about what you did in your private life, whether you're a celebrity or an influencer or a politician. And now people are looking at what you're doing behind the scenes. And if that doesn't match the public image that you put out, be afraid. Be very afraid, because sooner or later you will topple from your pedestal, and just like a star, a bright star in the sky, it will burn out.
Right.
And that is my prediction. So that means we've just got to stop using fill in the blank templates or formulas or one size fits all, and start using our imagination or our creativity and really connecting to our customers, and really, really listen and really make sure that we're aligned inside and out.
So that brings me to one of it wasn't in the book, but it's on your website. You've produced a list of customer interview questions. And I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs are familiar with the notion that you should tap into what your customers care about. But I thought the way you framed yours was really interesting. And I love the one question in particular: what would you Google if you forgot my name? What could be a better way? What could be a more sort of modern, the way we actually function? Like, oh, I forgot Christie Turley's name. I wouldn't say that, of course. I forgot that woman's name I interviewed that time. She's a marketer. What would I type in? Right? Would it be
you would type in intuition-led business? Of course.
Exactly.
Intuition-led business. Yeah. And that's the way that I create marketing campaigns, that I help people brand, really tapping into themselves and then helping them connect with their customers. It's one and the same. We can't separate these things anymore. They are one and the same. The internal and the external, they've got to be aligned.
So do you want to talk a little bit about the other? I mean, you probably don't remember each and every question, but what are some of the other ways that you tap into the way you described this instrument was, it's a series of questions that you can ask your favorite customers. And I thought that was canny too. Why would you start with your favorite customers?
Why wouldn't you start with your favorite customers? Or if these are the types of customers that you just love being around, like if you had a backyard barbecue, you'd invite them over. Like I had a friend and client come into town from Texas. I had never met her before. She came into town, like in person, I mean, of course we've done Zooms. she came into town and we spent the whole day together just being friends. We didn't even have a work conversation that day. That's your favorite type of customer, the type of customer that you so enjoy working with that you could be friends with them and invite them over to your house. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. You need to start with your favorite types of customers and really recognize what their traits are, what matters to them, what are their values, so that you can start speaking directly to them. Because listen, a lot of us, we market to someone that, or even a mob of people, we don't have a true connection with them. I mean, a big example of this is during COVID, you would hear a lot of these commercials like, we know what you're going through. We know it's hard, and you're just like rolling your eyes because you're like, really, that's not coming across very genuine or authentic. And you're just talking words at me. You're not really connecting. And that's really what's going to be important in the future. If you haven't already had this kind of heart-centered, intuition-led approach to your marketing, and if your copywriters and your graphic designers are just checking the boxes and they're not connected to their work, they don't love their work, then that's going to show in the final product. So, and it's going to show in the bottom line because people aren't going to buy as much. I just feel like people can really tune into that tone deafness now in marketing. And if it hasn't caught up with you in the sales department yet, it will.
Well, so that's really interesting. First of all, I think it's a beautiful description of what marketing done well is. It's not tricking people into loving your product. It's finding people who would love your product. And I wonder if this makes sense to you, that it used to be you'd have the Don Draper come up with the Life cereal ad for the whole nation. And we couldn't even, and they used to say back then, half of the advertising we do doesn't work. We just don't know which half. So you got to buy the whole thing. But now we can be much more fine-tuned. I mean, you're in marketing, you know that you can tell who's reacting and who isn't. So there's no excuse anymore to say, we know what you're going through when you have no connection to your customer. How do you engage in a really fine-toothed way with the right people?
How do you engage with the right people in a fine-tuned way? Well, you've got to know who those favorite customers are. And you also have to know what your uncustomer is, what your not customer is, so that you can repel them. You want to repel them and you want to magnetize. And I feel like a lot of marketing doesn't go far enough. It doesn't push the envelope enough. It's not controversial enough. It doesn't make people think in a different way. Not in a manipulative way. It just presents like, a lot of people, like, for example, if I were doing an ad on intuition, I might appeal to the people who always think they're right. They always think they're right, and I would talk directly to them, and I would probably use the psychological technique of like projection. All of us do this. It's like we see in others what we do ourselves, whether it's good or bad. And so how annoying are those people that always think they're right? And then going into intuition and making that bridge, and that would transform their thinking. I feel like the best marketing helps to transform people's thinking. Again, not in a manipulative way. There's so many marketers out there that are still using these old tricks of like false scarcity. Only have 5 spots left, or products left, whatever it is, or false urgency. The deal closes on Friday. It only opens once a year, and a lot of times that's best for the business owner or the entrepreneur. It's not necessarily what's best for the customer. The customer can see right through that. How many of us have become almost immune to certain marketing techniques because it's a formula we recognize from like 10 other people that we've seen do that same thing. Yeah. And there's actually marketing experts that have made a great deal of money just teaching people how to copy other people's formulas. It's crazy.
Well, brava, because I really don't like that false scarcity narrative that comes with a lot of advertising. And you're right, a lot of people do see through it, but it's really a common technique all the time, this false urgency and everything. Um, it does turn my mind to another discussion. Not I don't think it featured too heavily in your book, but it's something that's been on your podcast, is the mindset of scarcity and abundance and how it affects our mindset. Do you want to talk a little bit about how we can, I mean, I think it applies to everything, not just business, but to love and everything. But do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love this topic. So there's this popular acronym out there called FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Yep.
And this is a common human trigger that if we're afraid we're going to miss out, well, we've got to do it. We've got to get in on the party because, it's going to go away. It's going to be taken off the table. And I feel like that comes from such a lower awareness of ourselves. Like I feel like we're almost like ascending or evolving into a higher consciousness. And so those lower levels of consciousness, those lower levels of marketing that aren't as creative, that have been used for, probably 100 years or more, they're going to stop working because people are going to evolve past it. And hopefully the marketing departments evolve with it and are not like, why isn't this working anymore? If it's not working anymore, you've got to innovate and try something else. Now, you can still use urgency. People need deadlines, right? Would some people get things done if there wasn't a deadline? Make sure it's authentic though. Mm-hmm. Make sure it is true. Like if you really only do have 5 products left in your inventory, then that's fine. But, don't make it your selling point. You've got to be a little more creative. It's like the people that are selling for like by price. They're like, oh, mine's cheaper. It's like, that's not a way to position your company for the long term. That's like a race to the bottom when you're doing stuff like that. So I would say, as far as appealing to that abundance side of things, where does scarcity come from? It comes from fear. It's a negative emotion. If you can come from something that is more positive, more from that higher part of yourself, that part of yourself that is inspired, that is aspirational, like some of these brands that are like, I don't want to mention specific brands, but, like if you can think of like an outdoor company, and they're aspirational, they're all about exploring, they're appealing to that archetype that you have inside of you, that explorer archetype. That is a much higher way of branding to appeal to people's values and their motivations, like their motivation to explore the world. That is a longer lasting game to play than we've only got 2 hats left and they're 10% off.
Right. Well, and I like that idea that you're touching on, which is, if you have a scarcity mindset, then you might feel like when you sell your service, the money you get is worth more than what you give, that it's always sort of, you're taking. Whereas if you can have an abundance mindset, you're like, if you pay me for my services, we're both better off. The world is better off. It's so much more comfortable. You're not really selling at that point. You're helping.
Right. The energy exchange is so important. Because if it's off balance, someone's going to feel resentful or they're going to feel like the other party has power over them. And so I feel like that's so important to honor yourself, especially in the services business. I think a lot of service-oriented people tend to put themselves last on the list. They tend not to know themselves as much. They tend to get wrapped up in other people very easily. And so it can be easy for those people to fall prey to, what kind of deals do you have for me?
Sure.
Can you make up my mind right now? Like, and it's like, stand in your power, own your value and say, this is the price. Like I heard someone say like, pass the mustard or pass, it's like you're at a dinner table. It's like, this is the price. Like it's no big deal. So many people can get really bogged down by that fear that they're not going to say yes, they're not going to sign the contract, they're going to think it's too much, or whatever it is. And the point is, find the people, find your favorite customers that do value the investment and do value what you give in return. So yeah, the abundance, it's coming from a sense that there's more than enough to go around. It's not like a piece of pie, and once all the pieces of pie are gone, it's gone. It's we can always make more money. We can always help more people. It's there's enough, and I am enough. That's really what abundance, I feel like, comes down to.
I like that. What you touched on earlier about how service businesses tend to fall prey to, just nickeling and diming. Come on, because they have no input cost, not on a balance sheet, right? I don't have to buy materials to advise you, for example. I don't have to buy a yard of concrete to help you develop your marketing campaign. But what my input cost is me. My input cost is my time, my energy, my soul. And if you frame it that way, you don't want to be giving that away for below the high value it has.
Right. And if there's one thing that we have a finite amount of, it's time.
Mm-hmm.
We only have so many years we're going to live. No one knows how long you're going to live, right? But that's the finite resource. And for the solopreneurs, I would agree with you. There are service-oriented businesses, of course, that have payroll to meet. And, if their team is working on something that is a lower dollar or lower value, and then you've got a big whale come in, and all of a sudden you don't have the resources to go forward or to serve that client in the highest possible way. So, how like some of us might have a muffin top. We have too tight of jeans and we have a little muffin top showing over. It's kind of like when you take on those customers that demand a deal, and they end up taking so much more of your time. And then when the good customer, the favorite customer, comes in the door, you've got a muffin top. How can you serve that one that you really, really would like to serve,
So earlier you talked about boundaries and how you assess what's important to you. That has to be an important set of skills when you're partnered with your husband or your wife. How do you recommend entrepreneurs who work together who are also married make it work?
Yeah. So, we've had a lot of people come up to us and say, how do you do it? You guys work together. My husband and I have been married. We just had our 19th anniversary. And thank you. And they have asked that. And, it takes effort. It takes energy. It doesn't just happen by accident. And, it's kind of like when you go, here's a metaphor. So chiropractic work. Okay. Your back can accidentally go out of whack, right? Can it accidentally go back in? No, you got to go see the chiropractor to get it adjusted,
right?
To get realigned. And I feel like when you have a good relationship with your spouse, and this goes also for partners that might not be married, it could be any type of partner, business partner, equity partner, sweat equity partner. You've got to keep coming back into alignment. And if you let something fester too long and you don't communicate about it, if you're not willing to explore and really hold space for another person without, getting resentful or getting offended, when there's no offense to be made, it's like, look, when you said this, I felt this way. And I know you probably didn't mean it that way, but let's talk about this. And such great insights and learning and growth can come from that. I feel like communication is just so, so key. And again, like that connection to yourself, loving yourself. You can only love another person as much as you love yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. You might have heard that.
Yeah.
You can only love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. That capacity can't grow beyond that. So I feel like working on yourself is also so key. It's like communication and working on yourself and realizing that in a way, life is like a myth. Life is like a hero's journey. Life is like a book or a movie. Look at the things happening in your life. What are they teaching you? What can you learn from them? What are the symbols? What are the characters? How can you apply this and then integrate it for true transformation so that you can go to the next level in your business? And yeah, I would leave it there. It's just like working with your spouse, especially when you're going home to the same person. You've got to have certain time for business and certain time for personal. And if you're talking about a spouse, certain time for romance, going out on dates, being with each other, not talking about shop or business, being and enjoying one another's company, and really, as much as a human being can possibly do, having unconditional love. Because I know that can be hard to have unconditional love when we're still human, right? So yeah.
Well, I'm sure having children reminds you to stop talking about shop occasionally.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't always the case. Our oldest is 5, our youngest is 3, and it took us a while to start a family, and years of some struggle there. And that's one thing that I really do appreciate now is like, yeah, it's like being present. When you're at work, be at work. When you're at home with family, be present at home and at family, and you won't ever find yourself missing out. If you're thinking about personal when you're at business, that means you're missing something in business, and vice versa. And so I feel like being present is so, so important, especially nowadays.
So let me circle back to a little bit of the marketing or sales, I suppose. You described 4 buying languages, ways to sort of interpret what your potential customers are saying or thinking in their head. There's 4 of them. I'm sure you know them by heart, but just in case, there's relator, investigator, visionary, and storyteller. How do you use that framework? Maybe use a couple of examples. How do you change your approach with one of those types of people if they're potential customers?
So if I've got an investigator type of person, these people are thinkers. Like if you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality test, they probably have a T in their profile, and they'll use words I think, or they might even use words I see the big picture, although that can relate to another type that I talk about in that buying languages guidebook on my site. And the way that you would relate to this investigator type is you're going to appeal to their their need for knowledge, their need for data, statistics. Now, you're not going to be as fluffy with them. Like, say, for a storyteller, you're going to engage multisensory with a storyteller. You're going to tell them stories. You might even throw in a statistic there if it tells a story, of course.
Yeah.
And when we know a particular language, like if I am the thinking type, I tend to market and sell in that particular language.
Yes.
That means I'm not very fluent in the other 3 unless I learn those languages. It's just like, we're talking English right now. I'm pretty fluent in Spanish, a little rusty, right? But if you fail to learn these other 3 languages, these buying languages, you're actually alienating 3/4 of your potential audience. So it's very important to employ all 4 buying styles into your languaging when you're marketing to them. And if you're interested in receiving that, that's on my website, ChristieTurley.com. It's on the free tab, and you can check that out. Highly recommend it because, yeah, it's even in a one-on-one sales conversation, if you fail to recognize that the person you're talking to is like a big picture person because they're using words like, I see, or I can see that. If you fail to recognize that and you're instead talking in a totally different language, it can be as subtle as you're using I think instead of I feel or I see. And subconsciously, they pick up on that. And subconsciously, they feel like you're not talking the same language, whether it's email or phone. So it's important to have fluency in those four languages.
Yeah, so I'm going to share the link to your website in the show notes, and there are many very useful, thought-provoking guides there. So I'll make sure people can find that.
Thank you.
When we talk about these different styles, my mind kind of went to the car buying experience. So if you're working in a car dealership, somebody might be like, this has overhead cams and 275 horsepower. Blah, blah, blah. Other people might just listen to that thing purr.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
There's different things that people care about. And if you're talking the wrong set of attributes, you're going to leave them cold. So I think that's really useful advice.
Yeah. And when you're in situations like that, that's why sales training is really important, because it's really people training. It's understanding the psychology of each person. There's even, oh gosh, you're probably going to find this interesting. There's a whole study of reading people's faces, facial profiling, and being able to tell personality traits from someone's face. Same thing with body type. There's a whole other body of work about body profiling, like how they move, how they hold themselves, what's going to be important to them, what is going to be valuable for them. So yeah, we're in the people business. If you're an entrepreneur, you're in the people business, and you would be well advised to learn as much as you can about yourself as well as other people, so that you can really increase that awareness and that openness.
So the book is terrific.
Thank you.
Can you tell me the process you went through to write it and get it published?
Yeah. So, it all starts with an idea, and I pushed this idea off for a couple of years. I had the thought, I've always thought since I was a child, I was going to write a book. And about 3 years ago, I had this thought, like, I really feel like it's soon. And I asked, what is it going to be about? And I got the instant answer, intuition. It's like, yeah, right. Why would I write a book about intuition? I am all about marketing and branding. Why wouldn't I write a book about that? And I came to realize that it really was integral to everything that I'm about. It's so part of me. And so a couple years later, fast forward, I learned, I studied, I mastered my intuition even more. And I had this client come to me and say, I'm thinking about writing a book. What do you think? I said, yeah, great. And told him some ideas of how to make it a must read. And he's like, do you have a book? And I said, no, I don't. Why not? He was so surprised. Fast forward the next week, same conversation, different client. Asked me about a book I hadn't written yet. And why not? Great. Okay. Next week, get a voicemail. It's the wrong number, this voicemail. It said, it is very urgent that we hear from you. Your book has been selected for our event. It sounded prestigious, whatever it was, and urgent. So I turned to my intuition. I said, okay. And guess what my intuition said? Yep, it's time. Glad you got all the hints we've been sending you. And I proceeded immediately to start writing. I outlined it. The document I started in Google Docs. I wrote the title out, The Intuition-Led Business, not knowing that was actually going to be the title. It just felt like that's going to be the working title. Mm-hmm. It totally came from my intuition, right? And I started writing the book. I finished writing the book within like 14 or 21 days, somewhere around there. It was the holidays, so there was a couple of days off here and there. But solid work, just getting up early, writing the book, letting it flow. If I felt like I was forcing something, I stopped. I worked on something else. I really listened to that intuition, because especially on the subject matter, it was so important to feel in that flow, like really connected to the material and excited about it. Finished the book, went through editing process, took a few months. I actually I hate to admit it, I put it on a shelf for like 3 months. Didn't come back to it. COVID hit. And I was like, I don't know. There was just so many things up in the air. And then I came back to it, and I felt like, you know what? In a post-COVID world, I hate that term. But whatever this new paradigm is, this new
Sure.
world, this is what people need. This is meant to be. This is the information entrepreneurs need, because I could see the marketplace starting to shift. I could see consumers making different decisions than they had prior. And this is the way we've got to lead ourselves and lead our business is through that intuition. So anyway, I ended up self-publishing. And it's funny because in that mastermind, I could have gotten a publishing deal, just like that. It would have taken 2 or 3 years to finally see it. I felt this was so important to get out there that I self-published it, got it done immediately. It was like very gratifying. Could get a book right there on demand. And so yeah, it's on Amazon and Kindle and my own website. And I have gotten such fantastic testimonials. Like the other day, I got one that almost had me in tears. I was doing a keynote a couple of weeks ago. Someone else almost had me in tears. The amount of transformation and results that they've seen from the book has just been like mind blowing, and it's so fulfilling.
Well, that's wonderful, and I like. I think that self-publishing is the way to go. I mean, that's what other authors have said to me as well. I didn't think of the immediacy as being one of the advantages, but you're right. I mean, if it has to wend its way through an organization, a bureaucracy, it's going to take longer. But one of the reasons it takes a long time, of course, is it goes from one hand to the other. Yep. And one of those hands is an editor. Did you hire an editor, or were you, because it's well edited? I didn't notice any errors in it. And you're very well spoken, but we're all, when it comes to our own words, it's easy to overlook our own mistakes, right? Did you hire an editor?
I did. And I first got it as complete as I could. I know some people are like, get the first draft over and let them do it. But I felt like it had to be, in my mind, organized and clear and as grammatically correct as possible before it got to the editor, just because of the nature of the type of information that I'm giving, And so, yeah, I did hire an editor. It went through a couple of drafts where I would receive the edits back, make some more edits, and then, gosh, that dang intuition would come in and say, add a couple more things here. And so I would, and of course those parts had to be rechecked or checked for the first time. Yeah. And so, yeah, it was just a couple of edits and got it to print. And yeah. And the other thing about self-publishing, going back to what we were saying before about how people are taking the power back themselves and taking it away from the institutions. Yeah. So publishers are like another form of institution, another form of structure. The old paradigm, we think, oh, we've got to find a publisher or an agent. No, you don't. You've got to have great marketing and a great message to get out there, but you don't really need anything else. So don't put off the book. If you're listening to this and you're thinking about writing a book, don't put it off. Set the time aside, do it, get it published, get it out, because people need your message. People need it. And there's no better time than now to, create a new movement, to create that impact. And if that's truly, truly your desire, I'd love to hear from you, because I love working with messengers. I love people who are in the limelight and they have a certain message that they love to get out there. And that's how we're going to change our world, is through thought, is through new thoughts, new ideas, new concepts. And how do those come through? Intuition.
So I'm sure a lot of people listening struggled to believe how quickly you wrote your first draft. How long was it again?
I don't remember the exact dates, but it was during the holiday season. It was between 2 and 3 weeks, because there was like a couple of holidays mixed in there, birthday parties, stuff like that. But yeah, I would get up early in the morning, work 2 to 3 hours on the book. I'm very quick. I think my words per minute are, 90 to 100 words per minute or something like that. I did have some recordings that I had done that felt like I could transcribe those. Mm-hmm. I could edit those. So that sped up the process. There were some things that I had at my fingertips like that. Other things, like stories. I mean, stories just flow. Like if you've
Sure.
lived it, easy. Other things, I mean, I had very like little research or like fact checking to do. Like some people need to do that because they've quoted someone or they're stating a statistic. I do have some of those in there, of course, because some investigators are watching and listening. But a lot of it is from my own experience
Yeah.
and things I've learned about how different people operate and how intuition is received differently through different types of people. And so it really felt like it flowed, and it felt like it flowed from higher wisdom. Like getting ready for this interview, I was a little nervous because I was like, you know what? Sometimes when things come from higher wisdom, you almost forget you said it
Yeah.
until, you know,
I
it's like
do
you're
know.
channeling from some
Yeah.
higher wisdom. And so, I feel like that was such a really cool experience to recognize thoughts and write them down on paper. And I'm like, I didn't know I knew that. It's like when you have that spiritual sense of clear knowing, which I talk about in the book, like things without knowing how you know. That's the best. That's the best spiritual sense in my book. Like that is the fastest. I know there's others that are more glamorous that people value more, but I really think that is one of the best. And the clear hearing was another one. I think a lot of speakers and thought leaders have the clear hearing spiritual sense. It's just a matter of learning how to use it. Like a lot of times they're verbally processing or they're talking something out loud or even talking to a friend, not necessarily on stage. And they say something and they're like, oh my gosh, I got to write that down. Like, where did that come from? So good. And our intuition can speak that way as well to us through words we speak or through words we hear. There's several ways that I talk about in the book. So we're all different, and it's important to honor how we best learn and understand our intuition.
So, do you have any advice for would-be authors out there? How should they get started and get their book out into the world? How should they write it?
So there's not one way to write a book, and you've got to look at your lifestyle, look at all the other things that are going on right now without getting overwhelmed, without saying, oh, I don't possibly have time. You know what? When you get creative, you realize that for example, you could spend an hour or two every day watching something on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Well, could you not do that for 3 weeks?
Sure.
I mean, I would challenge you, if you thought you could, if it were possible to write your book in 3 weeks, how would you do it? How would you do it?
Do the math. Know the number of words.
Yes.
How many words do you have to do a day?
How many words do you have to do a day? How long is it going to take you to type that amount of words? And do it that way. And then the other thing I would say is some people like get stuck on, oh, I don't have the amount of experience necessary to write a book, or other excuses. I don't have the time, or I don't know if it's really going to, help my business or whatever. And I would just challenge you to look at those things. Look at, where are they coming from? Can you clear them? Can you shift your thinking? Can you find a better thought to replace that? Can you find a more empowering thought to replace that? And go from there and just go for it. I really, everyone, I mean, I could have said, oh, intuition, that's been talked about before, right? It's not been talked about before from my perspective.
Right.
I don't know if there's anything talking about intuition and business combined. And so there's probably a million excuses someone could have. I would just look at those and really evaluate how true they are and see if you can come up with different evidence.
That's inspirational. This has been a terrific conversation. I have one last question. I've kept you for, I think, maybe even longer than we anticipated. So thank you. It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun.
So my last question is, why is never give up terrible advice?
Because sometimes you've got to give up. Sometimes you've got to quit something in order to find something that is more aligned to your identity and to your purpose. We are taught that winners never quit and quitters never win. And that is old advice, probably passed down through the generations. And it's negating that winter that we talked about before.
Right.
It's some things must follow their natural course, and you must let them die in order for something new to replace them. And if you never give up on something, like you never sell a business, or you never close a business, or you never whatever, end a relationship, fill in the blank. If something in your life, you never give up on it, you're beating a dead horse in a way. So it's like it could already be dead and you're like still trying to throw money at it. So yes, of course it's okay to give up, and it does not make you a loser. In fact, I think it makes you stronger, and it makes you, I don't want to say makes you, but it helps you to follow your highest good and your highest path in life and business.
That's beautiful. I love the way you frame that. You got to let go of something to seize something else. That's great advice. Thank you, Christie, for being on the show.
My pleasure. It's been so fun. Thank you, Tim.
Me too. My guest today was Christie Turley. Christie's website and information on where to get her book titled The Intuition-Led Business will be in the show notes. My name is Tim Hampton, and you can reach me at tim@unusuallywellinformed.com. Thanks for listening. I hope you'll subscribe and join me for the next show with another unusually well-informed leader in business and technology.
Thank you for listening to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast.
The opinions expressed by the host and guests on the Unusually Well-Informed podcast are their own and do not reflect that of their employer or any other affiliation.